Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 9th of February of 2024. Today we have significant number of very interesting updates, we have more attacks, we have additional Russian progress, we have a lot of details, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about Avdiivka. Before we start the situation discussion, the situation on the ground, of course the most important update is that Syrskyi began to transfer reserves to Avdiivka in order to break through the encirclement of the city and to fulfill his promise to Zelensky. The new commander-in-chief, unlike Zaluzhny, does not oppose the president's decision and will hold Avdiivka as a new symbol of resistance. The Ukrainians are not planning to hold Avdiivka forever. They remain short. The main goal is to hold Avdiivka until the end of president election campaign in Russia. So until not to give Putin possibility to win the president elections with the flag above Avdiivka. So this is like another political battle, another Ukrainian fortezza. But let's discuss the details on the ground and understand whether the Ukrainians are able to do this or not. And first we're going to talk about the southern direction. We got a very interesting and very cool video from the southern streets from Sobornoye, Sportivnoye and Chernyshevskoye. This video was published today. On this video, for example, you can see the Russian soldiers who were moving along the streets of the southern part. This is the video of movements along probably Chernyshevskoye street. We see significant number of Russian soldiers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, up to 8 soldiers were recorded on this video. Then we have another footage of another group of Russian soldiers who were moving along Sportivnoye street, and they were moving in direction of Ukrainian positions on the intersections of all three roads. On this video we can see another group of Russian soldiers who were moving from garages on the, let's say, in this area. If you take a look at map, you're gonna see the cursor I'm pointing you. So we see that there are lots of Russian soldiers on the south. You need to point few important things. First one is that the Russians are really relaxed. We don't see any FPV drone strikes. We see significant number of Russians and we don't see FPV drones. We don't see artillery strikes, we don't see mortar strikes. We see the Russians are moving from one building to another. Maybe they're doing some clearing operation, maybe they're trying to establish control over another building. More and more groups are coming one by one, and the main purpose to establish control over one and another building, so like to stretch forces. Another important thing you need to note is the number of Russian forces. Could of course agree with me that there are significant number of soldiers. Just on this video probably we might count up to 100 soldiers who discovered their positions because they were moving during the daylight. They were moving during the daylight without any, let's say, without any worrying of being attacked by FPV drones. So what does it mean? What this video means for us when talking about the Battle of Avdiivka? First of all, we have adjusted the map according to the video. The first one of the scenes took place in these garages that, as you can see, now is under complete Russian control, and we have some footage and scenes from the intersections of Chernyshevskoye, Sportivnoye and Sobornoye street. All these events, all these scenes completely confirms that the Russians managed to secure and establish complete and full control over the southern part of Avdiivka. They don't have any problem to control the territory. This is the first thing. The second thing is that while the Russians and the Ukrainians had very heavy clashes in the central part, in the vicinity of the chemical plant, in the vicinity of industrial area, the Russians managed to concentrate significant number of forces on the south. They had time for regrouping, they had operational pause to get relaxed, to, let's say, change forces, to make rotations, to bring some ammo. So they feel themselves completely comfortable and very strong positions on the south, which means that very likely in the very near future, maybe within the next 48 or 72 hours, the Russians will start their offensive operation from the south, and this is going to be the end of Ukrainian defense, because the Ukrainians do have forces to fight with the Russians. But if the Russians launch another massive attack as they currently started in the central part, of course the Ukrainians probably don't have so many reserves to repel the Russians in the central, in the eastern, on the southern part. Anyway, sooner or later the Ukrainian defense will be collapsed, and then we're gonna see the withdrawing or retreating process. Now we are moving to the eastern part. The Russians very slowly, carefully, step by step, attacking and bombing the Ukrainian positions with missiles, with FPV drones, with Mur missiles. So the same story currently. The line of combat contact goes along the Donetsk filtration station, which is still in the Ukrainian control, but very likely the Ukrainians will be forced to withdraw their positions very soon because of very big problems in the central part, and probably in the very near future very big problems from the south. When talking about the eastern direction today, according to unconfirmed reports, the Ukrainians took a decision to step back from another, let's say, garden holder, let's say place from this residential area, an association, garden holder association. If you remember, yes, during the previous days, the Ukrainians left from Raduga, and now the Ukrainians left from Verbova, let's say, garden association, and the Ukrainians are moving to the central part of Avdiivka. This is a very important update because we know that there are very big problem with the Ukrainian forces in the stronghold to the south of Kamyanka. So very likely the Ukrainians, probably these Ukrainians were abandoned here and they will be encircled, or maybe the entire Ukrainian garrison took a decision to withdraw their positions. So these like very important updates, but not the updates that describe the current situation. Of course, the situation can be described just by the clashes and activity in the central part. And we, as you can see, we have adjusted the map now, which shows bigger foothold of the Russian forces in the central part under their control, and that was made based on the video that was published by the 110th Mechanized Brigade. On this video, for example, we can see the Russian soldiers who were moving inside of Avdiivka in the central part. Another Russian group were moving to the south from the north, from Krasnogorovka. This video was made by the 110th Brigade, and after that the Ukrainians start bombing and attacking the Russians. So there is a very long video, there are a lot of scenes. We will not watch the video due to casualties and violence, but according to that video we managed to geolocate significant number of episodes, and according to let's say geolocations, the Russians on that video were moving first of all along this line. So that was the movements of the Russian infantry. They were moving in this direction. Also we have update of the Russian presence in this building, let's say, and also according to that video, the Russians managed to reach almost the, let's say, railway bridge. So based on that, we have adjusted the map, at least in this part of the central part of Avdiivka. So now let's move about the updates that we don't have geolocations, but we have some reports from the ground, from the soldiers, from the war journalists, and so on. And according to information we have, the Russians continue advancing further in direction of the central part of Avdiivka, and currently the line of combat contact goes along the Frunze line, or this one, and this information was confirmed by many resources, by many independent and different sources. Furthermore, a lot of mappers have already updated their maps, so this is the situation, at least in this part. Very reliable resource reported about additional progress of the Russian forces, and according to him, the Russians, as a result of offensive operation, managed to establish control, or at least to enter the bus station. So we were talking about this territory for many times. This is like the key area, this is a vital area for either for the Russians and for the Ukrainians. And according to one pro-Russian reliable sources, he is the war journalist who operates in this area, the Russians managed to enter this territory, and currently there are very heavy clashes. Maybe I chose the wrong color. It's better to show this territory as a gray zone, but so let's for better understanding, let's color this territory in like pink, gray zone. There are very heavy clashes, and as you can see, the Russians are getting closer and closer to industrial Ave. Very likely the Russians, according to him, entered this territory at night from the 8th till 9th of February. So during the entire day there were very heavy clashes. Probably this evening, this night, or upcoming day, we're going to receive more details and information about the clashes on this territory. Another important update is coming from the central part, because the Ukrainians are losing their positions, and because of the fact the situation is getting worse and worse, the Ukrainians try to establish and create something like operational stronghold, like temporary stronghold with strategical, let's say, goals. This one currently the Ukrainians are trying to dig in deeper, let's say, with the engineering equipment they have, with the forces they have. They try to prepare the, let's say, a stronghold with, let's say, the stones and wood or something like this, because they didn't expect the Russians are able to get here and are able to attack from the north. And this is very important, and currently the Ukrainians think that this is the most valuable and important area, because if the Russians are able to establish control over this intersection of streets Chistakova and Shestakova, this is like the main Ukrainian defense belt right now, then if the Russians are able to capture this territory, then this is going to be, according to the Ukrainians, the end of Avdiivka. And if Ukrainians will be forced to step back further to the south, this is going to mean that Avdiivka was cut off in two pieces, and then the Russians will handle with every single piece separately. Furthermore, to today, during the night, we got the first update, first confirmation that Ukrainians took a decision or made an attempt to evacuate the first batch of Ukrainian soldiers from the central and the eastern part, or from the ninth quarter. According to a war journalist Marat Khairulin, the Ukrainians used for that purposes or made the first attempt with 100 soldiers, and they were trying to evacuate them from the ninth quarter, and they were using a very short, very small corridor for those purposes. And the Ukrainians start movement, but the Russians managed to discover the movement and start bombing and attacking this territory with FAB, or maybe everything fit at the same time. And the Ukrainians were trying to evacuate, let's say something like this, let's say to move probably in direction of Severna, and then maybe to the north in direction of Orlovka, something like this, right? And so that was approximately the road of Ukrainian evacuation. This one, something like this, but the Ukrainians got this area and this territory, the intersection of Industrial Ave and Grushevskaya Street. The Russians bombed this territory heavily, and having significant losses, the Ukrainians were forced to change their plans and to stop evacuation process. So this is the situation of Avdiivka. Once again, we started this report from Syrsky that he will send more and more forces in this area. I'm not sure that he is able to change the situation, but political decision is to hold Avdiivka until at least the end of the president elections. This is from one point of view. From another, we remember and we discussed that the Russians, this more or less comfortable weather for offensive operation will take place for another 2 or maybe 3 weeks maximum. Then the weather is going to be very bad, with a very poor quality, and maybe the Ukrainians also count on this fact, thinking that this will reduce the Russian activities and their possibilities to attack. Maybe this is what the Ukrainians are expecting and waiting for. Or maybe Zelensky wants to hold Avdiivka until the end of the voting for another military package, and he doesn't want to lose Avdiivka until the law adopted or something like this. Now we are moving to Pervomaiska. The same military journalist Marat Khairulin reported that the Russians continue advancing along Pervomaiska Street in Pervomaiska, and as a result of offensive operation, the Russians managed to reach the intersection of, let's say, the Shkolnaya Street and Pervomaiska Street. So according to him, he is the journalist on the ground. He goes from one front line to another. According to him, currently the Russians control something like this on this direction. We can't tell for sure whether it's true or not, because it's too big progress for the Russians just for a few days, but maybe the Russians managed to achieve the results before, and now we got some text confirmations. Of course, we're gonna wait for some video confirmations to adjust the map, but according to him, this is something like a progress on this direction. Now we're moving to Georgievka Street, and according also to him, the same military journalist, he published very few posts of the situation on the ground. He says that the Russians continue advancing further the northern street of Georgievka, and that the Russians started entering Georgievka from the north. So according to him, the Russians continue advancing along Zhovtneva Street, and the Russians managed to advance and to establish additional control over additional buildings, and from these positions the Russians made few attempts to enter Georgievka from the north. So something like this. Currently we also haven't received any geolocated confirmation of that, but this is very interesting, let's say, development of the situation on this direction. We got very interesting update about the situation in the stronghold that located to the west of Marinka and to the southeast of Georgievka. This one. Today the Russian sources published the video of storming operation of the village of this stronghold. On this video, for example, we can see just FPV drone strike, but there was a voice recorded on the radio when the soldiers on the ground were talking with some kind of coordinator, someone on the base, and the coordinator told the Russian soldiers on the ground, don't throw grenade inside of the trenches because you need ammo. We will send FPV drone and we will, let's say, clear these trenches with FPV drone. So what does he mean? According to my understanding of the situation, the Russians started the storming operation of these trenches. They landed in this area and started clearing this territory. And when the Russians got to another trenches, another stronghold or another shelter, the Russian soldiers wanted to throw grenade inside of the stronghold, let's say to force the Ukrainians to step back or maybe to wound them or something like this, or to clear these trenches. But the commander on the radio told them not to throw grenade because obviously they're gonna need grenades, because because within the next few hours the Ukrainians probably will make a counterattack, and it's better to have let's say grenades with them, but not to waste them during this storming operation. So that's why they sent FPV drone and cleared the shelter with that. So this is the situation for now. We have adjusted the map, and now we're showing this territory as a gray zone. And I'll remind you that since the beginning of February we got at least 2 geolocated videos from the same territory. The Russians on the first video were bombing the Ukrainian positions, the Ukrainian trenches with artillery. The Ukrainians were trying to move from one position to another, trying to dodge the Russian artillery strikes. On the second video we see FPV drone strike against the same area with of Ukrainian position. So we see a certain concentration of geolocations during the week. So the chances that there is a very heavy clashes are very high, and probably very soon we're going to receive some updates about the progress and the results of these clashes. We haven't received anything from Novomikhailivka, just small FPV drone strike with that have no meaning, no value. We also continue receiving the pictures of the results of Russian Iskander strikes against the temporary positions of the Ukrainian forces in Kurakhova. Another explosion, other results we got from Vishneva. So as you can see, the Russians tried to control the Ukrainian reserves, the Ukrainian operational and tactical reserve that they sent here for replacement and fulfilling the losses on this direction. So as you can see, the situation is getting worse and worse for the Ukrainians. Now we are moving to the north in direction of Bakhmut, Artyomovsk direction. Probably the most important updates, not like the most important as usually are from Avdiivka, but let's say the second place of the importance of updates are coming from this direction. Today we have a lot of geolocations, as you can see, but most of the geolocations that we were receiving during the day were about nothing. So just before that, let's start first of all from Ivanovska. Kamerton Akhmat Special Forces published additional video of bombing and attacking and shelling the Ukrainian positions in the southeastern part of Ivanovska, which confirms some certain Russian progress and some certain Russian focus in this territory. Basically, the Russians tried to penetrate the Ukrainian defense belt, to destroy the defense belt, and then to enter with the Kamerton Akhmat forces. We have geolocated confirmation, so I expect within the next few days the first updates about the Russian clashes inside of the village, and I'll explain to you why. To understand why the Russians have chances to enter Ivanovsk and basically to capture this village very fast, it's better to start discussion from the northern direction, from the area between Bogdanovka and Ivanovska itself. As you can see, we have a lot of geolocations. We have reports from the Russian sources. The first report we got somewhere at 3 p.m. of the local time, and the Russian pro-Russian channel, Telegram channel, reported that the Russians, as a result of offensive operation, managed to establish control over few important strongholds. They managed to capture significant number of prisoners of war, and so on. Later we got additional video, but that video I added softland map. These two videos weren't geolocated, and according to the author of this video, he says that on these scenes, on this movie, on this video, we can see the retreat process of the Ukrainians. We see at least 4 Ukrainians who were heading in direction of Ukrainian positions somewhere in the vicinity of Chasiv. And this is the same story according to the author of this video. The Ukrainians were abandoning their positions. Once again, this video was added on map softly because it was very difficult to geolocate due to the poor quality of the video, and not just the poor quality of the video. The important thing that you need to note from these two videos is that this territory completely covered with the fog, with the natural fog, which reduced the Ukrainian possibilities to control the situation. And as I understand today, the Russians, when they discovered the fog above the territory, took a decision to use this natural benefit and to start offensive. The Ukrainians basically haven't seen that attack. They probably were sleeping or something like this, and the Russians managed to cover significant territories and to capture significant positions. And right before I start making the video, we got the first geolocated video. I geolocated this video by myself. On this video we can see the storm process of the Russian infantry in direction of Popovo forest. This video was geolocated, and this video confirms, for example, this is the new cemetery. You see the lines of new cemetery 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So according to this video, we can make 100% conclusion that as a result of clashes during the previous days, the Russians managed to establish complete control over the new cemetery. On this video, we see how the Russian, let's say, personnel carrier entered the territory. The infantry landed on the ground somewhere in front of Popovo forest, and after that, the Russian infantry, under support of another personnel carrier or armored personnel carrier or BMP or something like this, started movements in direction of Popovo forest. Currently, we don't know the results of that clashes, of that attack, but according to the, let's say, the updates and piece of news we're receiving from this area, very likely the Russians managed to establish control, or at least to enter Popovo Forest, and currently there are very heavy clashes. As we discussed, Popovo Forest is strategical defense belt, strategical hill, strategical area in this territory, and if the Russians are able or were able to establish control, we can say about the entire collapse of Ukraine defense belt between Bogdanovka and Ivanovska itself. So according to that video, the Russians were entered this territory on the personnel armored carrier, something like this, through, of course, through New Cemetery. They landed the infantry somewhere here. And after that, let's say the Russians started movements and storming the forest in this area. And once again, very likely the Russians haven't captured the entire Popovo Forest, but very likely the Russians managed to establish control over some positions, maybe over the edge positions, and very likely that this is the current and approximately the current control as by 9th of February at 8 p.m. of the local time. This is very important because now we understand what is going on in Ivanovska, because if the Russians, and they will be able to establish control over complete Popovo Forest, obviously they will move further to the south and they will do something like this in the very near future. They're not going to wait like months or weeks to do this, and of course from these positions the Russians will storm Ivanovska from at least two directions, and this is going to be the end of the story of, let's say, Ukrainian foothold in the vicinity of Bakhmut-Artyomovsk. So this is the story about this. Furthermore, the Russians continue bombing and attacking the Ukrainian positions with FPV drones, with Lancets, and so on. So everything was under very, very interesting control. Everything was under Russian control, and we see how the Russians handled the situation. We were expecting this attack because, once again, to understand the situation in this area, it's better to increase the numbers of this since the beginning of January. We see how the Russians were focused in this area. Obviously, according to these geolocations, we can make a conclusion that every single square meter of this territory was once but was under Russian attack. So everything was destroyed. There were no places where the Ukrainians could hide. The Ukrainians didn't have artillery, FPV drones, they had nothing. They couldn't counterattack the Russians. They couldn't do any counter actions against the Russians, and it was just a matter of time when the Ukrainians will be forced to step back, will be defeated, and would be forced to step back. So this is the situation in the vicinity of Bakhmut-Artyomovsk. Obviously significant progress on the results. Now we are moving to Sever's direction. We have the footage. The Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation published the footage of storming of Vysyoly. If you remember, they reported about that attack somewhere in the middle of January, but just now, months after probably or something like this, they published the geolocations and the episodes of fightings in the vicinity of this territory. So nothing special, just the storming progress. Also, we have the videos of how the Russians were bombing and attacking the Ukrainian positions with artillery. Lots of very heavy artillery bombings. Probably the published video of Russian progress in Vysyoly and all these artillery bombings means that very likely after very long, probably 2 or 3 weeks of operational pause, the Russians will renew their offensive and will start a movement further to the north in direction of Siversk along the railways and trying to encircle Rozdolovka as well. Now we are moving to Bilogorovka area, and we also got the first geolocations of Russian progress. We will not watch the video because of violence, but the Ukrainian sources published the videos of FPV drones against the offensive Russian groups. The Russians, according to that video, managed to get the garages area, these garage areas, and they captured it. And probably we still haven't received any geolocation from the filtration station, but if the Russian control this territory, very likely that, and based on most of the valuable, let's say, sources and mappers, the filtration station is also under Russian control. So we'll see what is going to be next. I expect the Russian attack from the Seversky Donetsk River from the north due to the previous bombings in this area, but for now nothing happened from this direction. Liman area, we haven't received any update. We haven't received anything from Kupinsk, just one report about the further Russian progress, that the Russians entered Sinkovka once again. Some sources reported that there are 7 streets in Sinkovka at all. In total, total, and the Russians control 2 streets of 7. So, but no geolocations, nothing special. And when talking about Kharkiv direction, we have a report that the New York Times confirmed that Russian Il-76 was shot down by Patriot system. We have another prisoner exchange process. 100 Russian soldiers returned in exchange for 100 soldiers from Ukrainian army. And we have another geolocated video of results of strike. So this is basically the most updates on the ground. Let's discuss a few things from the southern direction. For the second time in a row, the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation haven't provided even a single number about the situation in Zaporozhye area, which confirms that activity in this area was reduced till minimal level. So the Russians once again didn't include Zaporozhye area into their daily report. Very likely this situation is connected with the weather and with the fact that activity is on the minimal level. When talking about Kherson direction, the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation published the video of HIMARS, of strikes of Tornado S against the Ukrainian HIMARS system. On this video, according to the Russians, they managed to destroy the barrack with the HIMARS system, and a few seconds later, the Russians published another video how they managed to destroy the S-300 air defense system on the same direction. So as you can see, the Russians but this is not the end. The thing is that the Ukrainians also published the video of HIMARS strike, and the Ukrainians, as a result of their HIMARS strike, managed to destroy the Russian air defense system, Strela, probably a few multi-launch rocket system, few artillery systems probably. And I think that the Ukrainian HIMARS video and the Russian anti-HIMARS video are the videos about the same HIMARS. So the Ukrainians brought the HIMARS, brought air defense, they made few strikes, the Russians discovered, the Russians destroyed the Ukrainian HIMARS, and also the Russians destroyed few S-300 systems. So something like this took place in Kherson direction. Important thing we need to note, and I think that we need to discuss this before the final part, the Ukrainian losses. This is very important. I continued following the table, and according to my updates, the Ukrainians since the beginning of February lost around 7,750 soldiers. So for 9 days of February, the Ukrainians lost 7,700 soldiers. During the same period of time, in January, the Ukrainians lost 5,900. So as you can see, we see the significant increase of losses from the Ukrainian army since the beginning of the February, which means about the most active and the most heaviest part of the Russian offensive operation. As we discussed, the Russians entered into the final stage of winter campaign, the stage when everything will be resolved. And today, another day of heaviest losses from the Ukrainian side. 1,000 soldiers the Ukrainians lost just during the previous 24 hours. This is the second place since the beginning of the year, and we see the situation is worsening and worsening. Another important update is coming. Let's finalize the video. Is from the border with Hungary. The Ukrainian military authorities published another video how they managed to capture additional 38 men who were trying to leave the country for Hungary, but they were captured on the border, and obviously within a month they will be sent to Avdiivka. And now we see the final update, and this is very important update. We see the first strikes in Kiev. Currently there are not like thousands of people, there are just maybe 100 or maybe less, but it's the beginning. It's the beginning because every single process, everything starts from one dot, and this is the first dot in Kiev. People are tired, people are exhausted, and they start striking. Maybe these people were paid to start this, but anyway, some forces in Ukraine try to understand whether they are able to collect people and whether the people already tired, so they are ready to start striking in the capital of Ukraine. And that's it for today. Military Summer channel reminds you, condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.